James Maffie, thanks once again for joining me on the Hermitix podcast.
Of course, my pleasure.
So, last time we discussed broadly your book, Aztec Philosophy, which in that episode, you said, well, the original title that you'd come up with was going to be Aztec Metaphysics, but the publisher sort of said, look, it's a bit too specific, let's stick to philosophy. And in that talk that we had, we briefly dipped into the ethics of Aztec philosophy, but broadly it was about Teot and about the metaphysics and about that general understanding. So this time it's going to primarily be on the ethics, but I want to start somewhere more peculiar and very beautiful in its imagery for anyone who wants to go look it up, which is the Tonalamatl, Tonalamatl, for anyone who is wondering, because my pronunciation, from the pronunciations, but there you go. So the Tonalamatl, and I want to begin here because it's to do with decision making, to do with possibly divination, but not.
Yeah, definitely. Not possibly.
Okay.
James,
what is it? What is the Tonalamatl? Let's start there.
For starters, your folks can access almost all of these called pictorial codices, some of which are pre-contact, some of which are post-contact. The lion's share, there were supposedly hundreds and hundreds of these in a library that the Spaniards burned at a website called FAMSI or FAMSI. And if you go there and at the top, they'll have a little box that will say writing. Click on that, go to Aztecs. They'll give you a choice between two different editions. And you can see these things. They're gorgeous. I don't know. I could try to pull up a copy in a minute. So the Tonalamatl is based upon a 260-day cycle or a calendar. So the Mexica had two different calendars, a solar calendar, 360 plus 5 days. And then they also had the Tonalpohualli, which is the 260-day calendar called a ritual calendar. And that is made manifest. The Tonalpohualli, the 260-day calendar, is sort of put down in paint and ink on paper in these books, what the Aztecs called Tonalamatl, which really means tonali books or tonali paper. Amat, it means paper. And so tonali is this kind of energy that comes from the sun. And there are 260 qualitatively different kinds of sun energy or tonali that come over the course of this 260-day cycle. You can, with great great caution, kind of liken it to astrology, but can't go too far. But so the sun is emitting this energy, and it's qualitatively different, and it influences you on the day you're born, or with a particular kind of energy. It gives you that energy, but it's not hard and fast. It's not fatalistic or deterministic in any way. So you have these 260 different kinds of tonali, and they're put down graphically in the Tonalamatl, the book of tonalis. Let me quickly. Okay, here's one of the pages. Mm-hmm. Now, in this 260-day ritual cycle, there are 20 different sort of months. A month is 20 days, and there are 20 of them, and they're sort of based upon the number of count of 35. Though that works a little better. Okay, so it's a little blurry, isn't it?
I'll edit them in. They'll be here.
So basically what you have is sort of a dominant sort of deity, and then a number of other, they're day lords, they're night lords. It's very, very complicated. So these books are the images on the book are made from paint, ink, and they're on paper. And they're described by the people who Bernardino de Sahagún interviews in his book, The Florentine Codex, as Ixipla. Now, Ixipla is a Nahuatl word which means sort of impersonator or deity impersonator or representative. But in fact, this is a broader notion, this notion of an Ixipla, and it happens when a thing, it can be a statue, commonly in rituals it's a human, pretty much becomes transformed into a deity. And typically in rituals, that deity is typically dispatched, immolated, sacrificed. But there's a possibility of deities being present in things, much as we think that, right, Jesus is in the host, in the wine and in the wafer. So these images are described as Ixipla. And therefore the images are not lifeless pictures or representations or symbols. These paint, ink configurations, I don't want to say images, are in fact alive. They're persons, they're deity persons. That, just as Jesus is in that wine and in that wafer, the God are in these images. So it's not a matter of representation or symbolization or depiction, but they're there. So they're right there on the page. So the person who interprets these, a guy named a Tonalamatl, or what we could loosely call a diviner, accesses these. And these are then oracularly interacted with. So the person, the diviner, the Tonalamatl, standardly ingests what we would call psychotropic substances, psilocybin mushrooms, Jimson weed, Jimson seeds, various things that put him in what we, but not them, would call an altered state of consciousness.
What would they consider that state?
It's just, it's not normal, but it gives them access to things that otherwise they can't. It allows them to talk with the gods in a way that normally they can't. So the pages of this book make present right there these deities with whom one has to speak. So the deities function as oracles. So here's how it goes. You have a question. When should I go to war? When should I go on a mercantile expedition? Who shall I marry? When shall I marry? So forth. You go to the Tonalamatl, the diviner, and you go ask him this question. And that person then goes to the Tonalamatl, the book, and puts the question to these deities. Because these deities are the ones who are powerful on a given month, right? And so they're the ones that you have to deal with in order to get things done in the world. Because the world is this very, very crowded, it's a social universe. The people in the universe or the cosmos aren't just human beings, but they're tables, chairs, dogs, cats, trees, plants, rivers, lakes, mountains, sun, moon, deities, right? So, and getting along in the world requires getting the cooperation, or at least diffusing the opposition of all of these actors. So you always, the Aztecs are always trying to get along with everybody, in a sense, right? In order to realize their practical goals. So you go and you say, when, who, where shall I get married? The diviner goes and puts that, ingests the psychotropic substance, then talks with these people and puts the question to them. They talk back to them, back to the diviner. So it's an oracular situation, right? It's not a matter of reading or deciphering the significance of images or symbols. It's a matter of oracular conversation. So they tell you, look at, this is how I'm feeling. This is where my powers are this month. Maybe you need to watch out for so-and-so. So you get that advice as the diviner. You bring it back to your client and you say, look, this is what I learned. If you want to succeed in this adventure, or what's an advantageous day for getting married, you need to gift certain people to get them on your side, or you need to gift certain people to diffuse their opposition, right? So it's all very, very practical, and you need to then engage in these practical activities in order to maximize the probability of the success of your practical endeavor. So that's pretty much what it's all about. And so the books aren't really books as we understand them. They're talking books. If you remember the old album by Stevie Wonder, he had an album called Talking Books. And he had another one, Conversations in the Key of Life. And I think it's a conversations with time persons. So these people on the pages of the Tonalamatl I refer to as time persons because it is their activities that constitute time, right? Things don't happen in time for the Mexica, right? They don't have a Newtonian conception of time or a Newtonian conception of space where things happen in space, where time and space are these containers or a big clock ticking away. It's much more Leibnizian and then sort of relativityist Einsteinian, where time is identical with the processing of the universe. Space is identical with the processing of the universe, and the processing of the universe is largely, but not entirely, a function of these powerful people, how they act and what they do. Human beings have a say in this if they're smart. So we're not shut out of this process. We could refer to it as a participatory universe in which human beings can try to direct the future course of the universe one way rather than the other. So this is how the Tonalamatl works. It's oracular, but the standard interpretations are that it's a book of symbols, that people are deciphering, interpreting symbols. It's all about reading, and writing. But the Aztecs at this point were, an oral culture. And the principal means of communicating between not only humans and humans, but humans and deities is orally, through speech, right? Speech is the principal way that human beings worship or admire or revere the gods. Because speech is powerful. And so well-ordered speech can be beneficial. It's a gift, right? Well-spoken words. There's energy, there's life energy in those words. So that is the principal way that human beings interact with the deities. And speaking well is essential, right? People who can't speak well are just said to be sort of muddle speakers. And in order to speak properly, you have to eat maize. We're right. Maize, corn. You can't speak, yeah.
What does that mean?
Maize is very, very powerful and very central in Mesoamerican philosophy. Okay. Everything revolves around maize. We're made of maize. Our blood is made. Our flesh is maize. We eat maize. Maize eats us. We're essentially made up of the same stuff as maize.
Why maize?
Why? Because it is the principal staple crop of Mesoamerica, right? Maize enables human beings to stop being chichimecs, hunter-gatherer.
There's sort of an ecology of metaphysics there. The sun with its specific energy for the tonali coming down, growing the maize, which then forms us into the physical right. beings. But maize is, of course, a sort of relatively universal physical life source.
Yeah. I mean, so is the sun and the earth. But yeah, they all come. So there's this symbiotic relationship between humans and maize. We eat it and it eats us. We sacrifice our lives through our labor for its reproduction. It sacrifices its life for our reproduction.
There's something interesting there, thinking about, obviously I did this last time, but it's the familiar grammar to refer Aztec metaphysics to the sort of Christian grammar. There's a strange similarity between we need to get Abraham in the desert calling down manna, so the manna from above as the divine substance which you need faith for. But in this case, we have the literal physical maize as the substance. So when someone isn't talking well, as you said, quite literally they need to eat maize, or is that also a metaphor of they need to
I
having
don't
more
think it's
experience of life?
no, I mean, it's not a metaphor.
Okay.
There's an anthropologist guy named Mark Christensen who's done some work with some Tzotzil Maya speakers in Guatemala. And he comes into their village and they say, "Boy, you speak Tzotzil Maya pretty well. You must eat maize. You must not be eating wheat tortillas. Because if you ate wheat tortillas, you couldn't speak Tzotzil this well."
Mm.
And then they said, "But if you really want to speak properly, excellently, you have to eat locally grown maize, maize from our own gardens, our own milpas." So there's this notion,
Oh no,
nobody,
there's a frustration because it's such a great metaphor of
it's not
being. I
metaphor
know
though.
it's not a metaphor.
Yeah,
I know it's not. As you're saying, it's a literal thing, but it also works extremely well as a metaphor. That's my frustration as
yeah,
a Westerner caught up with philosophy.
yeah. Maize is key.
Mm.
Um, when foreigners come down, there's an account in the Historia Toti Chichimeca. When foreigners come down and they want to fight with Nahuatl speakers, the first thing they do is they give them maize because that will enable them to speak clearly and intelligibly.
Mm.
Because these hunter-gatherers from the north are, eating berries or deer or rabbit and stuff. So maize is key because it also it makes possible settled existence. We're
Yeah.
no longer hunter-gatherers. We can settle down. It makes possible knowledge. There's a lot of divination that employ maize kernels. It really, yeah, things pivot around maize, very much so.
When you were studying now, what did you eat? Did you eat maize, or were you a wheat? Were you a wheat tortilla man?
I was eating wheat tortillas, and that's why I don't speak very well.
Did it, were you ever introduced to that? Eating
No, I
maize?
wasn't introduced to that, although with some native speakers that I visited, they pretty much, wheat, they just poo-pooed. They said, "Why would you eat that stuff? That's mestizo food." There's
Mestizo?
serious mestizo, right? Mixed blood Mexican. Um, I mean, this is not uncommon, right? And
Mm.
mestizos think corn is basically not very good food, right? I mean, the Spaniards come in, when the Spaniards invade, they bring wheat with them. They can think maize is basically pig food.
Mm.
It's not proper food for humans. And wheat is proper food for humans. And the indigenous people think that maize is the proper food for humans.
Mm. And Westerners have 50 grain whole grain bread. So I don't know what that says about us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why we're so
I
confused. There's
think
too much
so. That's what I was going
grain.
to say. That's why it's frustrating that it's not a metaphor because it works so well. I mean, I guess we'd have to tell people to eat Pop Tarts, wouldn't we, or something like that? They need to get to know us. Um, but with regard to the Tonalamatl, I mean, I think this is why in my mind I put the Tonalamatl and ethics together because you mentioned as well, the diviner takes this substance to converse with the gods or the god, the specific god, which is in relation to the thing needed. And you gave the example there of if someone was going off to war. And so many, when I was reading about the Tonalamatl from the 3 papers that you sent me and a couple of your other talks, my mind, like my very Western mind, was immediately not being able to detach, especially something such as going to war, as an ethical foremost. This is an ethical decision for anything, right? This isn't a decision of power or resources or whatever it might be. I think for Western nations, it is foremost, how much blood needs to be shed. That is an ethical decision surrounding life. So, but you're saying there isn't. Before we start recording, you said there isn't any ethical really connection to the Tonalamatl. This is just how it is on this day from the Tonalamatl, from this living image. This is just the advice for your decision, but
Right.
there's no ethics in there.
I don't think so. No.
No.
No. The rightness or wrongness of the
Mm.
action whether or not it'll create imbalance or promote balance, I don't think so. I mean, I never really have asked because I haven't wondered and asked because typically people don't. No scholarship has gone this way. So you're asking a brand new question of me. Um, yeah, I don't know. No, I need to think about it. Maybe I'll get back to you.
Well,
My sense that it's just always purely sort of practical logistic advice. This is what you need in order to maximize your chances of getting your end.
so
But
the ethical ground is sort of there already, accepted within that culture of Teot.
well, yeah. The ethical ground is not a function of or dependent upon the tonal amat.
Mm.
The ethical ground, human beings are born. I mean, morality is woven into the fabric of the cosmos quite independently of consulting the tonal amat. It's objective. It's not conventional. It's not subjective. It's not arbitrary. And it has to do with balancing and reciprocity. That's the key is reciprocity. And it's non-anthropocentric, right? There's this notion of gifting and mutual gifting and indebtedness. So human beings are born with what I call original indebtedness, not sin, but indebtedness. The gods put themselves out, they exhaust themselves, they expend a great deal of energy in creating the world and creating us. And as a result of that, we're born owing them something. We owe them back. Just as the way that at least some Westerners think that, you're born indebted to your parents. There's your mom. She went through labor, a lot of pain, 9 months of you being a little turd in the oven. You owe her something, and that's why you ought to take care of her when she's older, and why you ought to take care of your dad when you're older, or your grandma and your grandpa. So you're born into this web of social relationships, and they're ones of indebtedness. You owe your parents, you owe your neighbors, you owe all these people who have done something to help bring you into life or help nurture and raise you. First and foremost, right, the deities, the gods who created you individually, but also the species of human beings. And you always have to be sort of repaying. So I'm gifted life. And as a result of that, I'm obliged to re-gift life. So receiving this gift, willingly or not, consciously or not, I become indebted. And I'm obliged to re-gift. So I'm obliged, or human beings in general, and me in particular, are obliged to re-gift. So re-gift the gods to even up the score, right? To balance things. And then if they accept my gift, they're obliged to re-gift to me. When I accept, I'm obliged to re-gift to them. So you have these reciprocity relationships, these complex webs of social reciprocity relationships which happen and which bind the community together. If you keep those all in balance, in terms of always keeping this back and forth of reciprocity going, then things are well balanced and in harmony. But if you let those lapse, then you get social disintegration and discord and malarrangement.
There's something so interesting that, especially in relation to our own modern, once again, Western culture of individualism, in that it makes one realize that this individualism sees everything as sort of as lifetimes as lines. I'm born, at a certain point I'm going to die. That's my lot. There is no, maybe you might, as you said, you might think, well, my parents, housed me and brought me up, but beyond that line, that this is my little piece of life. But there's certainly not this, and of course, I imagine this comes from even though we're supposedly secular, this comes from a deeply rooted religious notions of a clear telos. But the difference here is with Teot and with Aztec metaphysics, you're born into the flux, and that seems to be the big difference. And so because you're born into that, doesn't seem to be these as clear cut decisions of, if I do X, then there will be good and the good will be done. There's an acceptance of that things are just constantly intermingling. So it sounds a bit defeatist the way I'm about to put it, but the best one can hope for is just to, for their time, balance as best as one can. But that's from the Western viewpoint. That would seem defeatist.
Yeah,
But like,
I mean, you're it's not just going with the flow because
no.
you can influence the flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not passive and sort of defeatist. You can influence how things turn out. You can and influence the future course of the universe itself by either screwing it up or keeping it in balance. Um, yeah. I mean, and also, I mean, it's this notion of these different kinds of tonality isn't sort of fatalistic or deterministic because you can act to counteract the kind of tonality you were born with, right? So if you're born with a think of these as sort of predispositions or proclivities, right? I can be born with a predisposition to heart disease. Doesn't mean I'm going to contract heart disease. It means it's something I have to keep my eye on and watch out for and do things to, prevent from developing. And it's the same way with if I'm sort of, an Aztec and I'm born under the sign that I have a predisposition to be a drunkard. Doesn't mean I'm going to be one. My parents can help. My community can help. I can do things to keep that from coming about. It's a predisposition or proclivity, not a hard determined destiny. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think back to your characterization, thinking it's defeated. I mean, yeah, you're in the flux here. There's no escape. You're not going to be able to get out of it and go to heaven and to escape to some transcendent realm.
I think, well, yeah, that's why what I was saying there was that I think it's defeatist from a Western viewpoint because we see
Yeah.
things as, if I do this good, then this community is set when I die, or this nation is set when I die. But
now nothing's ever set. I mean, it's a world in motion, right? It's a process metaphysics, and things are always falling apart, right? As Chinua Achebe, right, wrote that good book, Things Fall Apart, which he stole from some English poet. I can't remember. Things Fall Apart. Early 20th century English poet. At any rate, things are always coming unraveled, wearing out. Think your clothes, relationships. You got to work at these things to keep them going. So there's this constant effort involved with keeping things in balance, and things are always in flux.
but
So yeah,
from this flux, they say that you say things fall apart, but at the beginning they're also constructed. So they're constructed, they're built, and then they're around for a bit, and then they fall apart. Is there an Aztec sort of projection of right and wrong onto this, or right as in something's being built and something falling apart is wrong? Because it seems like there wouldn't be.
Yeah. I think something just falling apart may not be desirable for us, say our community, but I'm not sure it's objectively wrong. I think actions that promote balance are morally right. Actions that promote imbalance are morally wrong. And why that's, I think, just a given. That's just baseline.
Why would someone willfully promote imbalance in the Aztec view?
Well, they could be ignorant. They could be deranged themselves and do it. If their mind bodies are deranged, decentered, imbalanced, then they would tend to act in ways that promote imbalance and derangement and disorder.
Does that follow then that there are, for the Aztecs, times of balance, times of imbalance, long periods of balance?
No, no. There's this metaphor that maybe you come across about walking upon the slippery earth, but there's another one that has a mother advises her daughter. This is also in Sahagún's General History of the Things of New Spain, or the Florentine Codex, who says, on earth we travel upon a narrow, jagged, harpoon-sharp-like path between two mountain peaks. So here we are, and life is always up on a path. We're always moving. So there's no sort of time of balance more than a second, right? You're balanced right now. In a moment, you could slip. Mm. It's like riding a bike, walking down, doing anything. You're always trying to balance. So here's this notion. We're walking down this very narrow, jagged path, and we're trying to maintain our balance. Because if we lose our balance, we slip into disorder, derangement, and those typically, the consequences of those are individual pain, suffering, death, and social pain, suffering, death, and consequences for other people. So there's not like a time like 2 years of balance and 2 years of imbalance. Balance is always the product of this constant back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, this way, this way, this way, mutual gifting. The cyclical alternation of day, night, wet, dry, above, below, male, female, all of that. So balance is dynamic and dichronic and dialectical. It's never the static thing that you go, I'm in balance. I'm in nirvana right now for the next 5 minutes.
What does balance look like?
Yeah. Well, what's it look like?
Harmony?
Walking down the road without falling, riding a bicycle without tipping over.
I'm doing well.
Well, those are analogies. There are examples of balance. Mutual gifting between you and your friends or your partner. I give, you give back. Think about relationships. We talk about give and take. We talk about, I'm giving more than I'm receiving. Those are ways of having an imbalanced relationship, and we expect to have a balanced relationship, a healthy relationship, to have this sort of giving, mutual giving. I guess there's a little danger here. It doesn't have to be quantitatively identical. My example here is, you think, when you're a little kid and it's Mother's Day, here your mom's gone through all this hell to give you birth and to raise you. You've been crying and shitting in your pants all these years. On Mother's Day, you make this sweet little card with a, unicorn and sprinkles and rainbows on it, and you give it to your mom, right? Mm-hmm. That's a repayment, a re-gifting to her. And it obviously isn't, quantitatively speaking, commensurate with what she's done. Mm. But it's just gifting back, and it's I think it's enough to restore balance.
Mm-hmm. So most definitely the Western world is very unbalanced then.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah.
That's broad.
Like I said,
I'm painting with broad strokes there.
This ethics isn't anthropocentric. We have moral relationships with all these persons: plants, trees, lakes, mountains, sun, moon, earth. And it's odd. Lots of people, like in the Abrahamic tradition, talk about secular humanism, and secular humanism being horrible because it puts humans first. But in a lot of ways, Abrahamic religion puts humans first, right? We're the crown of creation. We're the top dogs, and the earth is given to us to dominate and exploit as we see fit, right?
The image of God.
What?
We're the image of God.
Yeah, we are. And nothing else is. And so, despite their saying, "Oh, really, it's God-centered," but we're the peaches. We're the crown of creation. For the Mexican, I think for all native peoples in North, Middle, South America, that's just not the case. We're one of, 1,000 different creatures. We have special duties to help keep this thing in balance, but that doesn't give us any special privileges in terms of like, oh, I'm a human, I can just trash that.
Is there anything like a great chain of being? You know, where
Not hierarchical,
not
no.
like a but a flat one where I guess it would have to be horizontal, right? No, but I mean,
Yeah, yeah, they
as you
have to go
said,
horizontal.
there is for instance, a human being is a dog isn't conscious of the debt that it owes its mother. We don't know,
Uh,
but most people would say that a dog or an
most people,
animal isn't as conscious, self-conscious as a human being in terms of how it can interact and experience the world. So
most
is
Western people.
with the Western people, there you go. So this is, I mean, this is
Um,
where the animism comes in, right? This is what we
yeah,
miss. This is our great imbalance. Do you think is that we're not only are we top dog, we're the only.
we're really the only people that matter. I mean, maybe, you're supposed to take care of the garden like, a good Thomist, but no. Yeah, I mean, there are these myths, at least in the middle and the south. I don't know about North America. There's this famous moche being in the Andes pre-Inca,
Hmm.
called. There's a great article by an anthropologist called Catherine Allen called "The Revolt of the Utensils," and it's all about this, and it depicts on this bowl. I think it's a bowl. Um, this day when human beings have been abusing their utensils, their spoons, their cooking pots, their digging sticks. And on this given day, they revolt and they go back, and it's depicted, and it's really wonderful. The spoons and the digging sticks and pots whacking the heck out of human beings for being abusive,
Hmm.
right? So they do have a sense of being properly treated.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, there's an animism there that, yeah, we find incomprehensible. For the Aztecs, there's a special ceremony involved with a monthly ceremony called Etzqualitzli, in which one gives gifts to one's tools, one's cooking pot, one's digging stick, one's loom. One re-gifts them for all the work they do for us over the year.
Okay, there's a couple of things there. Because well, and I'm throwing a lot at you, James, but it's good fun. I want to come back to the garden example with Thomas Aquinas, as you say, because I think it's something interesting there in the division. But just at the end there, you mentioned about giving back to your tools in the sense that they have sort of provided for you. And I almost wonder if we're as Westerners once again repressing an animism that oftentimes comes quite naturally to us. I mean, Marx would say, well, it's what is it, commodity fetishism. But I don't know about yourself whether or not you're a big driver, but there is a certain sadness when you've spent time with a car for 2 years and you sign the form for it to get crushed. And we would very begrudgingly, we'd say, it's a bit silly, but there is a bit of a bond. You've been through some
Yeah,
times together.
yeah.
This is a
Give it a
very,
name.
yeah, give it a name and you sort of pat it and sort of internally say thank you. But you do this I think you do this for a lot of things. Even I recently had a front door replaced, and then all of a sudden you're very aware of that door.
Huh.
That door has kept me safe for like 3 years now, right? But I would never think about caring about it in the way that you do anything that we consider to have some amount of consciousness.
Yeah, or
So
feeling. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
yeah. So this is the thing with why it was interesting you mentioned plants is that when we once again Westerners cultivate plants like in the house, we understand it's a living thing. We have to water it. We have to care for it. But the care kind of differs because it's care in the sense of, well, if it dies, it dies. And if it grows, well, it's going to look really nice for me. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to see this nice plant. But if it dies, it dies. What from the Aztec perspective, what is the difference in the engagement of caring for that plant there? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, it looks a lot like that, except for well, I guess if it dies, it dies. No, it's just a plant. Throw it out, throw it into the rubbish bin and go buy a new one at Sainsbury's or something. Yeah, I don't know. Um, I mean, this notion, I guess, that these are living things and one cares for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But you said last time we talked that you struggle for the animism to be, of the pavement. So would with my
I struggle for the animals.
like animism to even care for the pavement, for the
Oh,
sidewalk, for the
right.
sidewalk.
Yeah.
So what should it extend to all those things? Cars, doors.
Yeah, I think Native people do. There's a good article by, I can't remember the author's name, who talks about at least mid 20th century Maya women employing sewing machines and them regarding the sewing machines as animate and caring for them and treating them for as though they were persons.
Hmm. I mean, it's brilliant. It works so well because the implicit connections are in everything.
Uh-huh.
Hmm. It seems one couldn't be an atheist at all, like in this. You can't just detach yourself from this. Or that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, and it's, well, depends what you mean by atheist. But because I don't think these people are theists, I think they're pantheists, but pantheism actually is a form of atheism, right? It just means that everything's sacred. Doesn't mean that there's one sacred being or it's not polytheistic. There are a lot of them. I really think it just, they're persons all over the place.
Hmm.
Some of them are more powerful than others, right? Sun is more powerful than you and me. And so back to your great chain of being question, I mean, there's a horizontal. Some things have more power than other things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I may have more power than my fountain pen, but the sun or thunder or a tornado, hurricane clearly has more power than I do. But that doesn't mean that they're qualitatively better or distinct or ontologically on some hierarchical ladder where they have more isness or reality or being the way that you do in, I think, at least Christian metaphysics and with its roots in Platonic metaphysics.
Anything like laws or anything remotely close to an ethical dogma developed?
Ethical, by laws, do you want me just to talk about ethical laws or
Yeah, well,
we
yeah,
talk?
ethic. I mean, did have, I guess, in terms of Aztec ethics, from this reciprocal nature, has anything, cohered that are, ethical laws that have stood the test of time? I guess. I mean, we've got this
Uh,
notion of balance, but that doesn't seem like a set in stone, ironically, law.
you don't want to, and nothing stone disintegrates. So there are
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
um, I mean, they're set in tradition. I mean, I think contemporary native peoples in Mexico, if you read ethnographies, it's all about reciprocity and maintaining balance and respecting and caring for things. So it's not written down in some lawful kind of way. But it's just how you're raised to treat other people or other things. Um, Reciprocity and this sort of animism are just in your mother's milk, so to speak.
It all seems so simple. It does. It does.
Uh, yeah.
Have I missed something? Is it not simple? Is there?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess clearly you don't sort of have the casuistry that you do with a lot of Christian ethics. Um, um, I mean, I guess if, I mean, I'm reluctant to use the word simple because simple tends to be treated as simplistic
Uh,
or infantile or naive.
mm.
If we if we can divorce the word simple from all those connotations, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's a matter of maintaining balance with all these other persons in your life through reciprocity. The same ethnographer who wrote that book, that article on the utensils revolt, Catherine Allen wrote a great book called The Hold Life Has about Quechua speakers in Peru, and she argues that reciprocity pumps like a heart. Where something like it's the heart. It pumps like a heart. No, it's the pump at the heart of Quechua metaphysics. I mean, it's the heart is this notion of reciprocity. And Quechua speakers have reciprocity with mountains, with llamas, with lakes, with potatoes, with everything. You're always in this community and you're always interacting with a community of persons, be they human or not, and trying to maintain good relations, balanced relations with them. And if you don't, then things, go awry. Rocks tumble down out of the hills and kill you.
Do you think that could be defined as love? That reciprocity?
Uh, well, I mean, it depends what you mean by
Not
love.
the not once
A
again
guy,
once again not the typical Western
not the
romantic.
erotic one, not the
No.
platonic one. Yeah, I don't know. Um, there's another great ethnography by a guy named James Taggart. And I can't remember the title, but he asks people, he goes, "How do you know your mother loves you?" And he goes, "She feeds me. She makes me tortillas every morning and every night." And she asked the mother, "How do you know your sons love you?" And she goes, "They take care of me."
Mm.
So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know what if there is or what if there is what it is some interior emotion or sentiment going along with that, or it's just like I mean my love is made manifest in how I treat you. It's not necessarily this interior feeling that's divorced from my behavior. I think that sort of interior exterior, you know
Mm.
distinction doesn't exist. You are what you do. You do what you are. Um, and you, how you act expresses what you feel or what you think.
Has this understanding of Aztec ethics changed your own life?
Um, yeah, I think so. I think I have a better, I mean, not in any profound way. I'm still living here in the global north, living a rather imbalanced life vis-a-vis the environment. Um, but I think it gives you I mean, all of it just gives you a keener sense of being in and of the world, right? As opposed to the Christians who claim they're in the world but not of the world. We're in it and of it. This is it. Yeah,
I wonder why so many of us are reluctant to accept that. We want
because we want
we
something more.
always want something more, don't we?
There's got to be something more, right? There's got to be something permanent. There's got to be, yeah,
But in looking for something more, you always you're ignorant of how good a good meal is or a good walk is.
yeah. Yeah, I mean that's also the Buddhist message, right? Be here now, enjoy that meal now. Don't be thinking about the next bite, the next meal. Be there with the moment. Um, yeah, I mean that assumes you have a meal to be eating, but yeah. Um, but I don't know if it's universal or not. That impulse, that feeling that there's got to be something more. Um, my sense from studying Mesoamerican cultures is that I mean, they have a sense of continuity that I live on through my grandchildren and I live on through things, but not in a very sort of ego attached, identified way.
Hmm.
Or if you don't have this notion of a permanent eternal soul that's in there, apart, distinct from the body, then I think you're more at home in the world. You're in it and of it, right? But so long as that soul is not of it, it's of this higher realm. You're always thinking. I had a friend in grad school once tell me this was in the 80s when Cold War, we thought everybody was going to nuke one another to death. And I said, I won't mention his name, I said, dude, aren't you worried about this? And he goes, no, Jim, I'm in the world, but not of it. Holocaust happened, the nuclear bombs drop tomorrow. I'm in heaven, man. I don't care. This is just a temporary veil of tears, and then I'm out of here.
So
But if you think this is the only place there is, and this is the only shot you got, then maybe you have a different,
well,
maybe
no,
you have a different, or maybe not.
not only is this the only place there is, but you are the is.
Yeah,
If you see what
but
I
not
mean.
all of the is.
Not all of the is, but you
Yeah,
are of the is. Like, yeah.
you are of the is. Yeah. I mean, I guess the transcendental, the Christian sort of response to that is, well, if this is all there is, then you go around being immoral because there's no eternal punishment, deterring you. But
Hmm. Yeah.
but I, there, I'm not sure how much that actually deters anyone anyway.
I think if you're mentioning that you can be immoral, you know about morality, so you put yourself in a bind.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything we you want to add in about ethics that we haven't touched upon?
Um, no, it's really, I think just a matter of it really is reciprocity and balancing. Um, Exchanging, I mean, it can, you and I right now are exchanging life energy, right? But I mean, my teachers, gave things to me through oral instruction. That means I owe them something back. You owe your neighbors if they do things for you. Um, I mean, and I like that. And I like the fact that, I mean, in modern Western liberal political theory, big tent liberalism, right? Not the kind that gets called, but John Locke,
Mm.
that kind of liberalism. There's this notion that unless I accept the gift consciously from you, I'm not obligated to repay you, right?
Mm.
Um, Another friend of mine once said that he owed his parents nothing because he didn't choose to be born. They were the one who wanted him. They made the choice, and so he didn't owe his parents anything. Didn't owe them taking care of them when they got old or anything because it was their choice, and he didn't choose. He just got born. And then American philosopher named Jane English once has defended that in print, Journal of Philosophy, probably. Basically, if you don't accept the gift consciously, then you're not obligated. And like I said, for the Aztecs, I mean, you got this gift of life. You're born owing somebody for it,
Mm.
whether you like it or not. Um,
We struggle with that though.
yeah,
We struggle with that obligation.
yeah,
But then we, I mean, air, right? We breathe air. We don't do that consciously, but right? It's a gift, and we don't.
yeah, yeah.
We need it, and
Or the trees that make the oxygen. Yeah,
or
you
the
owe
ground,
them.
or the ground that makes
They're,
the food that keeps everything going.
yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
all of that ends up in a antinatalism, right? It ends up in a
And then what?
antinatalism, in the sense that it would have been better to not exist. But well, you do, right? So, well, that seems to be where that all goes. It's like
Wow.
if hang on, this whole idea of I didn't ask to be born. I mean, the assumption
Yeah,
there as well.
yeah.
Do you not want to be? Yeah, do you not want to be? It's
I've never heard that word antinatalism.
have you not?
No, no, no.
Oh dear, don't
It's a
Google it.
thing?
Don't Google it, James. Yeah, yeah, it's a
Really? Wow.
big philosophy.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
that
wow.
it would have been better to not exist at all.
Wow. Huh. I mean, I guess maybe as an undergrad, I remember people mentioning that, but I never have read anything serious about it. But that's just my own my own.
You're enjoying life. That's the problem.
I mean, I guess yeah, that should lead to suicide then.
I think the usual argument on there is that suicide would, because like right. So the usual argument is, and it's kind of a balance actually. The usual argument is that life is really bad. It's basically just suffering. So it would have been better to not exist, but your suicide would cause a far greater
Um,
increase of suffering for
yeah,
those
right.
around you, right? So
Yeah, I
it's a
mean,
strange sort of balance there, ironically.
Yeah. The Aztecs do. I mean, life is not a bed of roses, right? I mean, life is filled full of hardship. Um, there's pain, suffering, sorrow, hunger, thirst, and death. I mean, and then you die, right? Um, but there's this possibility of eking out good things in it,
Mm,
right? For them. I've never ever read anything, but the sources aren't perfect of, you know, anybody quoted in his verse saying, you know what, life sucks and then you die. Maybe it's better off I
Well,
mean,
I think the assumption, one of the assumptions there, at least from the Western point of view, is the
yeah,
assumption that life will be good and
yeah,
pleasurable.
it's meant to be. Yeah,
Meant
yeah,
to be. There you go. Meant to be. Should be.
yeah,
Wonder where that comes
yeah,
from. No one ever said that. No one ever said that when you were young, that life is going to be good. I guess you don't want to tell that to a kid.
yeah. I mean, I've heard people say about Westerners or United States Americans that they expect life to be good and that they're just naive.
Mm,
So, yeah, I don't know.
mm.
So, no, I can't think of anything else.
What are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on two things, which I should not be because they get in the way of one another. One is about the Tonalamatl, and I'm arguing that those images are alive and that the diviner speaks with them. That is not a very welcome view because, like I say, people have this print bias that they think everything's about reading. And they've talked themselves into claiming that a lot of this is also writing. So, on the one hand, they think they've accomplished something wonderful because now the Aztecs have writing, so they're just as smart as Europeans. But in the process, I think they've left behind. I mean, there's a bias there that writing's better than non-writing that you have to question. So I'm arguing that it's oracular, that it's all about orality and speech
Mm,
and talking and conversing with others. Then I'm working on a book. There's in the sacred precinct of downtown Tenochtitlan, the heart, the axis mundi of the cosmos. There is this thing called the skull rack, um, and it kind of the quickest thing to bring to mind is think of a large abacus, and you have the little things you shuffle when you're counting. Well, replace the little things you shuffle with skulls.
mm,
So you have this large sort of palisade or thing with skulls that have been holes impaled through the skulls, and they hang on this. Um, and the standard interpretation of that is that it's just there as sort of like the Aztecs' obsession with death. It's a trophy display. It's there to intimidate the population, intimidate visiting dignitaries. Um, it's there to, as a symbol of their imperial might, which, I mean, it could be all of those things, but I think really what it is, I mean, it has power. Generally, I'm trying to get away from symbolism because I think it's a distraction
mm,
um, from metaphysics. I think it's rooted in semiotics, and semiotics is rooted in the Reformation and the rejection of consubstantiality, right? That the host and the wine are symbolize Jesus. They aren't the real thing. Everything now becomes a symbol. So this is a cosmic milpa, this skull rack,
mm,
because skulls are likened to maize kernels. Little maize individuals are called maize skulls. And if you look at lots of depictions in Maya, in Cacaxtla and Aztec art, you'll see maize ears that are in the form of heads, and you'll see a corn plant, right? And instead of an ear of corn, there'll be a head in the shape of an ear of corn with a face and nose and mouth. So skulls get mounted on this thing, and it's really this. It's a maize field,
Hmm.
and it's a maize field which is contributing to the regeneration of maize. So it's a structure which also happens to be alive, that does something. It's active. It's an agent. It's not just a building. And what it does is help regenerate maize and
Hmm.
help keep us eating maize. So
Wow.
yeah, that's not, well, I don't know how popular
Is
that
it
will
still
be.
there? Is it still there, that skull rock?
No, it got torn down. But it was like, I think maybe 15 feet high, 15 feet or 15 meters, and it was long as a basketball court. It, um,
Well, the whole thing was skulls?
yeah, in several rows, about 7 rows of them. So there were a lot of skulls on this thing. Um, they've recently, just in the last 10 years, most of, excuse me, the structures from the sacred precinct are underneath colonial buildings.
Hmm.
Uh, and so recently, I guess there's a law in Mexico City that whenever some serious renovation happens, you got to call in the archaeologists. So these guys came in and said, yay, and they discovered the post holes where the skull rack was,
Hmm.
and the plaster foundation and the holes. So we have lots of colonial era descriptions of it, but never any physical evidence of it.
Okay.
So this was a big find. If you Google skull rack, I think Science News or Science, somebody with science in the title has, um, here, let me, I don't know, I'll just get distracted again.
Okay.
Google skull rack, you'll come up with a bunch of images, some of which are stupid, but some of them are good, and you might find an article in a scientific magazine reporting the discovery.
Okay.
So that was more than you wanted.
No, not at all. That's fascinating. So it's going to be a paper?
No, no, it's a book.
It's going to be a whole book
Yeah, yeah,
on skull rock.
yeah.
Wow. I look forward to
A
reading it.
short book.
Sure book. Okay.
Yeah, I wrote something that was too long to be an article and too short to be a book, so I'm expanding it to be a short book.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, you got to go through the language. You got to go through, everybody else's opinions of it. Um, the analogy between humans and maize. I mean, human beings mirror them, model their lives after the life structure of maize, um, and the centrality of maize and the milpa and the maize field. So
Yeah.
putting the oh, yeah,
Yeah. Well,
okay,
I'll be sure to put the links for
yeah,
your book once again in the description below.
all right. Thanks very much.
Yeah, James Maffie, thanks very much.
All right, toodles.